Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today we're going to combine ice resin with paper. Ice resin is a two-part resin epoxy, and it's designed for jewelry making to seal and to set bezels and pendants. And you can also use it for paper crafting to make beautiful, sturdy papers that have a translucent effect. So you can see on my journal cover here, this matte paper is actually a paper napkin, and I've coated it with ice resin front and back, and it makes it translucent. So you can see my hand through it or whatever papers I have underneath. At the same time, it's really flexible. It's super strong, super sturdy, makes a great journal cover, but I can also punch holes through it too to put my metal rings through. Super easy to do, so let me show you how I've done this. I mentioned that I started out with paper napkins, and you can use lots of different papers to do the same technique with. I happened to come across these really fun napkins at a museum store in Cologne, Germany, and they are a map of Cologne, so I thought that was really neat. And when you unfold the napkins, they end up being about 12 by 12 or maybe a little bit bigger, so they're folded in fourths. And I just cut along those lines so that I was able to get 4 pieces that were a nice kind of basic journal size for my covers, so nothing too big. And these are the papers that I'm going to put my ice resin on. Now, these also have a couple of different plies. So it's a 3-ply napkin, and I just let it be as it is. I didn't separate the plies, so you could certainly do that if you wanted to. So the next thing I need then is, of course, my ice resin. It is a 2-part resin epoxy, and you can either get it in a 1-ounce kind of serving, if you will, or you can get these larger bottles. This is 8 ounces, and you need to have part A and part B. They come together. And then you also need to have something to stir and mix them in. So the people at Ice Resin also have these little stir cups and stir sticks. So you need to have these. And you really want to mix up at least 2 tablespoons or 1 fluid ounce. And that's to this top of this line right here on this little cup. And if you try and mix anything smaller, it really doesn't mix very well. And it doesn't give you really enough to work with anyway. So go for the 1 ounce. And you can see the marked lines on here. These are going to help you when you're mixing this. It's really important that you mix equal portions of part A and part B. And all the instructions, of course, come with the ice resin when you get it. But it's actually very, very simple to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get my part A. This is the resin. And what I need to do if I'm going for 1 fluid ounce is fill it with up to 1/2 an ounce with my part A. And this is a very thick portion. It feels like, or it looks like syrup actually. It comes out quite slow, so it's easy to get just to that halfway mark and then stop. And it's really, really important that you do make sure that you're working with exact proportions. And then I can come in with my part B and add that and just top it off to the finish line, if you will. And this comes out much more quickly. This is a little bit more liquidy. Okay, so that's on there. And then I'm going to go ahead and set these 2 aside. Now the next thing I need to do is stir. And I'm going to use this little stick that's also part of the ice resin line. They have everything that you need. And what I'm going to do is stir for about 2 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And basically what I need to do is just clear out all of the kind of stripy bits of this liquid. You'll see as you're working with the 2 parts, they need to mix completely and thoroughly. So you'll be able to see as it mixes how it blends. And there are some little like striations or stripes in the liquid, and that will all be blended out as you stir. So as I'm stirring, I'm going around, but I'm also scraping down the sides of my little cup and really folding the liquid in. So it's like maybe making cake batter or something. You really want to fold it in. I tend to turn this around as I go just to make sure that I'm getting all of that really well stirred. And I'm going to stir this for about 2 minutes. This is not the most exhilarating part of today's segment, so I'm going to come back to you after I have stirred this completely. Okay, now my ice resin is all stirred up and it's completely clear and ready to use. And I've put on some plastic gloves. This is kind of important too because you really don't want to get this on your hands if you can avoid it. So I've got my gloves on and I've got a little piece of kitchen sponge. And this is just a regular kitchen sponge I picked up at the grocery store. And I cut it down into these little pieces. And this is what I'm going to use to apply my ice resin onto my napkin. And I'm working onto my craft sheet. This is one of probably the most useful things you can have when you're working with ice resin. One of these craft sheets from Ranger, because it will totally protect your work surface, and it also makes a nice working surface for the ice resin, because if you spill any onto the craft sheet, you can just peel it off when it's dry. So it works really nicely. Now I'm going to get rid of my little popsicle stick here now that I've stirred everything up and set that aside. And then working with the spongy part of my sponge rather than this scrubby bit up here, just going to dip this in, and I have my napkin on my craft sheet, and working from the center of my napkin, I'm just going to spread my resin out to the edges. And you may be tempted to skip the sponge and just pour your resin on. Don't do that because it uses up a lot more resin than you need for one piece of paper, because the paper really does absorb it quite quickly. So you want to make sure that you're maximizing your ice resin. So try it with the sponge. So I'm just going out from the center to the outside edges and brushing that on. You can see why I want to have those gloves. It's going to make things a lot easier. And this is as easy as it can possibly be. The end result is going to feel a bit like, almost like a plastic paper, which is going to be really cool. And now that I've got the entire front all ice resined, I'm going to pick this up and peel it off my sheet and then flip it over and place it back down. And then I'm going to do the reverse side of my napkin. So I'm coating both sides of it with the ice resin. Now you can also use a plastic garbage bag instead of a craft sheet. I like the craft sheets better because I don't feel like it's quite so wasteful. Because with that plastic bag, once you're done with it, you usually just toss it. And with a craft sheet, like I said, you can scrape off any excess resin that has dried on your craft sheet and use it again. So it's a lot more environmentally friendly too, I think. Okay, so now I've got the entire piece all completely covered in ice resin. I'm going to go ahead and do my second napkin as well. And I'm going to do a couple more napkins because I still have a lot of resin left in my little container. And you may be wondering how many pieces of paper you can do with 1 ounce of this. And I usually get 2 of these larger napkin pieces and then also a couple of smaller ones. So generally I can make 2 albums, from 2 journal covers front and back from one of these containers of the ice resin. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is you have about 30 to 40 minutes working time with this. So you don't want to walk away from your ice resin. Be sure and use it all up as quickly as you possibly can. And the other thing to keep in mind is that once you are done with your resin, the cup and the stir stick and the sponge, you need to throw those away. So that's why it's important to use these little disposable cups instead of something from your kitchen, for example. But of course you can still reuse your craft sheet too. So I'm going to go ahead and put some ice resin on my second piece of napkin for the back of my journal, and I'll see you in just a minute. Once I've let my ice resin pieces sit overnight, I can just peel them up off of my craft sheet And you may end up with stray bits of ice resin like this that hang off the side. Sometimes you can just pull those off. If you have bigger, more stubborn pieces, you can trim those off with scissors. It's really easy to do. So I've got my 2 pieces here, just peeling them up off of my craft sheet, and they are ready to work with. Oh my goodness, you can see what a great big long piece I have here. So I'll just turn that over and trim off with my scissors. And you can even file or sand down the edges if you want to get a really nice crisp effect. So then both of my pieces are ready to use. I wanted to bring back in my original journal so you could see it one more time. One of the really nice things about the ice resin paper is that although it's really sturdy, you can still punch holes through it. And I just used a standard handheld hole punch to punch holes through my front and back cover. I threaded them with these metal rings, and you can get them at office supply stores. And then I tied some ribbons around the outside edges here. I have a little metal book plate here on my front cover. And then because I wanted the details of the map paper to show up really well, the first sheet inside my journal is white. So that way it really helps the detail to stand out. Now also inside I've got lots more paper, cardstock, some paper that I've decorated. And then I also put in some little mini coin envelopes, and I thought those would be fun to have to stash memorabilia and other things. And then I've got the back cover of my album, of course, the same as the front. So this is how easy it is to use ice resin with paper to make journal covers and other really cool things for your paper crafts. I really hope you enjoyed today's segment. For more inspiration, please do stop by my website at saranaumann.com. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.